My husband called me too broken to raise our son while I was sitting less than 20 feet away from him in a North Carolina courtroom. He did not whisper it. He did not look embarrassed. He turned toward the judge, straightened the cuffs of his navy suit, and said, "Your Honor, Emma has never recovered from what happened overseas. She is too broken to give Noah the life he deserves." The courtroom became so quiet that I could hear the air vent above the clerk's desk. Daniel's attorney placed one hand on the table beside him. His new wife sat in the front row behind them, wearing a cream-colored dress and the expression of someone who believed the hardest part was already over. I looked at my son. Noah was sitting beside the court-appointed child advocate near the side wall. He was 12 years old, tall for his age, with the same dark hair Daniel had worn when we first met. He stared at the floor. I wanted to tell him not to listen. I wanted to stand up and explain that being injured was not the same thing as being broken. Instead, I kept both hands folded over the worn leather folder in my lap. Military hearings had taught me something a long time ago. When someone is determined to misunderstand you, more words rarely help. Evidence does. Judge Evelyn Marshall adjusted her glasses and looked toward Daniel. "You believe Mrs. Carter's military injuries make her an unfit parent?" Daniel hesitated for exactly the right amount of time, long enough to appear concerned, not long enough to look uncertain. "I believe she loves our son," he said. "But love is not always enough." His attorney nodded as if Daniel had said something courageous. I felt no anger, not yet. What I felt was something quieter, the same cold focus that used to settle over me before a convoy moved through dangerous territory. Judge Marshall looked toward my attorney. "Miss Brooks, has the court received Lieutenant Colonel Carter's complete military record?" My attorney, Linda Brooks, stood. "No, Your Honor. We received authorization yesterday morning." The judge turned toward the clerk. "Then I would like the complete record before we continue." Daniel's head moved slightly. It was a small reaction. Most people would not have noticed. I did. For the first time since the custody case began, he looked unsure. He had spent months describing my service, my injuries, my nightmares, my limp, my medical retirement, but Daniel had never read my full military record. He knew what the explosion had done to my body. He had never cared enough to learn what I had done before they carried me away from it. The clerk left through a side door. Daniel leaned toward his attorney and whispered something. His wife stopped smiling. I looked down at the folder in my lap. Inside were 12 years of school reports, medical appointments, soccer schedules, birthday photographs, teacher statements, and every receipt Daniel had never thought important enough to keep. But the document that would change the hearing was not inside my folder. It was sealed inside a military file Daniel believed would prove I was weak. 9 years earlier, I came home from Afghanistan, unable to walk without assistance. The transport plane landed at Pope Army Airfield on a gray afternoon in October. I remember the vibration beneath the stretcher, the smell of fuel, the medic checking the brace around my left leg for the third time. I remember looking through the small window and seeing green trees beyond the runway. After months of dust and concrete, North Carolina looked almost unreal. Mostly, I remember thinking about Noah. He was 4 months old. I had kissed his forehead the night before I deployed and told him I would be home before he learned to sit up. Instead, I returned with 3 fractured ribs, a damaged knee, nerve injuries in my left foot, and enough metal in my pelvis to make every airport security line difficult for the rest of my life. Our convoy had been supporting a civilian evacuation when the first explosion struck the vehicle in front of us. The second came while we were moving survivors away from the road. I remember pieces, fire, someone shouting for a medic, a young soldier trapped behind a damaged door, a little Afghan girl standing barefoot beside an overturned truck, then pain, a pressure so violent it felt as if the air itself had turned solid. The doctors told me later that I remained conscious for almost 20 minutes. I did not remember most of them. Daniel met me at the military hospital carrying flowers, white roses. He knew I preferred yellow daisies, but white roses looked better in photographs. He kissed my forehead, while a public affairs officer stood nearby. He told everyone he was proud of me. That night, after the cameras were gone, he sat in the chair beside my bed scrolling through his phone. "How long until you can walk?" he asked. "The doctors do not know." "Are we talking weeks or months?" "Months." He let out a slow breath. At the time, I thought he was frightened. Looking back, I think he was calculating. Noah was sleeping at Daniel's mother's house then. I asked when I could see him. Daniel said the hospital was no place for a baby. I argued. He told me I needed rest. The next afternoon he brought Noah for 17 minutes. I counted because a nurse wrote the time on the visitor board. My son wore a blue sweater with a small bear stitched across the front. He smelled like baby shampoo and formula. When Daniel placed him in my arms, pain shot through my ribs so sharply that my vision blurred. I held him anyway. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine. For the first time since the explosion, I cried. Daniel took a photograph. Then he said Noah needed to leave before traffic became difficult. 3 days later, he walked into my room carrying a manila envelope. He did not sit down. He placed it across my blanket. "What is this?" I asked. "Temporary custody papers." I looked at him. "Temporary? Until you recover." "I am his mother." "I know. Then why do I need to sign custody papers?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "Emma, be reasonable. You cannot stand. You cannot drive. You cannot even lift him without help." "I will have help." "From who?" "My brother. My unit. The family readiness group." "That is not a plan. It is more of a plan than taking my son away while I am still in a hospital bed." His face hardened. "I am trying to protect him." The sentence stayed with me for years. People often use the word protect when they want control to sound like love. I refused to sign. Daniel left the envelope on the table and walked out. He did not return for 4 days. When I was discharged, my older brother Michael drove me home. He had installed temporary rails in the bathroom and moved a bed into the downstairs office because I could not climb the stairs. The house looked normal from the driveway. Inside, half of Daniel's belongings were gone. So was Noah's crib. I stood in the entryway with a walker beneath my hands and stared at the empty space beside the wall. "Where is my son?" I asked. Michael did not answer. He did not need to. Daniel had moved into a furnished condo near Raleigh. Noah was with him. By evening, an attorney delivered an emergency custody petition claiming my injuries made the home unsafe. The petition described me as physically incapacitated and emotionally unstable. It said I suffered from combat-related episodes. It said Daniel had become Noah's primary caregiver. It did not mention that I had been home less than 1 week. It did not mention that I was injured while serving. It did not mention that Daniel had removed our child before I could object. I sat at the kitchen table reading the same paragraphs until the words blurred. Michael made coffee. I did not drink it. "What do we do?" he asked. I looked toward the empty space where Noah's high chair had been. "We document everything." That was the beginning. Not of the custody case in Judge Marshall's courtroom. That came years later. It was the beginning of learning how much a person can lose while everyone around them insists they are being helped. The first emergency hearing happened 2 weeks after I came home. I arrived in a wheelchair. Daniel arrived carrying Noah. He wore a gray suit and held our son as though fatherhood had always belonged entirely to him. The judge ordered temporary shared custody once my brother's home inspection was completed. Daniel objected. He said I could not safely care for a baby. My rehabilitation doctor testified by phone. A military family support coordinator described the home assistance available to me. The judge gave me 3 supervised afternoons a week. 3 afternoons, after carrying Noah inside my body. After singing to him through video calls from overseas. After surviving long enough to come home, I was allowed to hold my son while another adult watched. I could have let that humiliation destroy me. Some days it almost did. But children do not need perfect parents. They need parents who keep arriving. So I arrived. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I arrived in a wheelchair, then with a walker, then with 2 crutches, then 1. The first time I crossed the living room, using only a cane, Noah was learning to crawl. He moved toward me across the carpet, while my physical therapist stood behind my chair. I lowered myself to the floor, ignoring the pain in my pelvis, and opened my arms. He crawled straight into them. Nobody applauded. No one wrote a report. But that was the day I understood recovery would not be measured by what my body could no longer do. It would be measured by what I refused to stop doing. Within a year, the court granted equal custody. Daniel hated it. He never said that directly. He showed it in smaller ways. He scheduled appointments without telling me. He forgot to pack Noah's medication. He told preschool teachers my injuries made me confused. He referred to my home as the place Noah visited instead of the place he lived. Whenever I questioned him, he smiled and said I was being sensitive. I told myself we would eventually learn to co-parent. I wanted peace more than I wanted to prove him wrong. That was my mistake. Peace requires two people willing to stop fighting. What Daniel wanted was surrender. As Noah grew older, the difference between our homes became clearer. At my house, he helped cook dinner, left muddy shoes beside the back door, and built complicated forts across the living room. At Daniel's house, there were rules about noise, furniture, clothing, and what could be discussed. Daniel remarried when Noah was 6. His new wife, Claire, worked in public relations for a private school foundation. She was polished, organized, and always smiling when other people were watching. She sent holiday cards featuring matching clothes and professional photographs. I never appeared in them, neither did the years before she arrived. Daniel's version of the family became simple. He was the devoted father, Claire was the stable mother. I was the injured veteran who tried her best. For a long time I ignored it. Noah knew who I was. I believed that was enough. Then, 3 months before his 12th birthday, he was accepted into the Carolina Youth Leadership Academy. It was a selective program for students with strong academic records, community service, and leadership potential. Noah had worked on the application for months. He wrote his essay about helping veterans build wheelchair ramps with Michael and me. When the acceptance email arrived, he called me before anyone else. "We did it, Mom. You did it. You helped." I heard Daniel's voice in the background asking who he was talking to. The call ended a minute later. 2 weeks after that, a certified envelope arrived at my house. Petition for primary custody. Daniel claimed Noah needed a more stable environment to succeed in the academy. He said my medical limitations restricted travel. He said my military trauma created emotional unpredictability. He said Noah had begun expressing concern about my health. That last claim frightened me. Not because it was true, because Daniel had started teaching our son to see me through his language. Broken, unstable, limited. I called Linda Brooks that afternoon. She read the petition in silence. Then she looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Has Daniel ever reviewed your complete service record?" "No." "Has his attorney?" "I do not think so." She closed the file. "Good." I frowned. "Why is that good?" "Because he has built his entire case around the assumption that injury and instability mean the same thing." She leaned back. "They do not." For the next 3 months, we gathered everything. School records, medical evaluations, employment history, letters from teachers, statements from neighbors. Every parent conference, every appointment, every ordinary day, Daniel assumed no one was recording. The trial began on a Monday morning in March. Daniel's attorney spent nearly 2 hours describing what the explosion had taken from me. He discussed my limp, my chronic pain, the 2 surgeries I still needed, the nightmares I had reported during rehabilitation. He spoke about my body as though it were a damaged house no child should be forced to live inside. Daniel listened with the solemn expression of a man pretending this hurt him. Then he took the stand. He told the judge I loved Noah. He said I had served honorably. He said none of that changed reality. Finally, he looked toward me and said the words he had probably been rehearsing for years. "She is too broken to raise him." Now, as the clerk returned carrying a sealed military file, Daniel watched it cross the courtroom. Judge Marshall placed it on the bench. She broke the seal. Then she began to read. Daniel still believed those pages would prove his point. He had no idea they contained the one truth he had spent 9 years refusing to learn. Judge Marshall turned the first page, then the second. Service history, promotion records, deployment evaluations, medical reports. The courtroom remained quiet while she read. Daniel sat straighter beside his attorney. He still looked confident. I understood why. The first section confirmed everything he had spent months repeating. Multiple fractures, permanent nerve damage, chronic pain, post-traumatic stress symptoms during the first year after my deployment. He believed those words belonged to him now. He believed a diagnosis was the same thing as a verdict. Judge Marshall reached the psychological evaluations. She slowed down. Her finger moved beneath one paragraph. Then she looked at me. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, how many evaluations did you complete after returning from Afghanistan? 7 formal evaluations, Your Honor. Additional screenings during rehabilitation. Did any physician find that you were unable to make decisions for your child? No, ma'am. Daniel's attorney stood. Your Honor, we do not dispute that Mrs. Carter functions independently. The concern is whether her physical and emotional limitations create an unstable environment for a developing child. Judge Marshall looked back at the file. I understand your argument. She read another page, then another. Daniel leaned toward his attorney. Claire's hands tightened around the purse in her lap. The judge stopped again. This evaluation was completed 6 months after the incident? Yes, Your Honor. She read silently for several seconds. Then she spoke. The reviewing psychiatrist described Lieutenant Colonel Carter as demonstrating exceptional judgment, emotional regulation, and resilience under severe physical and psychological stress. Daniel's attorney shifted. Judge Marshall continued. The report states that she showed no evidence of impaired parental decision-making. Nobody spoke. The judge turned another page. This second evaluation was completed 1 year later. She looked toward Daniel. It reaches the same conclusion. His face changed slightly. He had expected the record to describe pain. He had not expected it to describe recovery. Judge Marshall continued reading. Then she reached the incident report. I knew the moment she found it. Her posture changed. Not dramatically. She simply became more still. The report had been classified for several years because the evacuation involved a joint operation and civilian casualties. By the time it was released, Daniel and I were already divorced. He never asked about it. Most people knew I had been injured in an explosion. Very few knew what happened during the 18 minutes before I lost consciousness. Judge Marshall removed her glasses. Lieutenant Colonel Carter, this report says you refused medical evacuation. Yes, Your Honor. Why? There were still people trapped near the second vehicle. You had already sustained serious injuries. I knew that. You continued directing the evacuation? Yes. For how long? I do not remember the exact time. The judge looked down. The report says 18 minutes. Daniel stared at me. I did not look at him. Judge Marshall continued. It states that you organized the removal of 11 soldiers and 4 civilians after the initial blast. I could hear someone in the gallery take a sharp breath. The judge's voice remained calm. It also states that you remained beside an injured child until the final evacuation vehicle arrived. The barefoot girl near the overturned truck. I had not thought about her in years without seeing smoke. Her name was Layla. She could not have been older than 6. A piece of metal had cut through her lower leg. She kept asking for her mother. I did not know enough Dari to explain that we were still looking. So I held her hand. I remember that. I remember telling her to watch my face instead of the road. I remember promising someone would come. Judge Marshall looked toward Daniel's attorney. Your client has described Lieutenant Colonel Carter as emotionally unreliable under stress. The attorney said nothing. The judge placed one hand on the open file. The official record describes a woman who continued protecting others after sustaining injuries that should have made movement nearly impossible. Daniel finally spoke. That was in combat, Your Honor. The words came out too quickly. Judge Marshall turned toward him. What distinction are you asking the court to make? Daniel swallowed. I am saying military performance does not automatically make someone a good mother. No, the judge replied. It does not. For a second, relief returned to his face. Then she continued. But you introduced her military injuries as evidence of instability. The complete military record directly contradicts that claim. Daniel looked at his attorney. The attorney lowered his eyes toward the table. Judge Marshall returned to the file. There was one more document behind the incident report. A family support record. I had forgotten it existed. The judge read the first page. Then she frowned. Mr. Carter, were you contacted by the Army Family Advocacy Program after your wife was injured? Daniel's face went still. I do not remember. The judge looked down again. The record shows you were contacted 3 times. His attorney stood. Your Honor, we have not reviewed this portion of the file. That appears to be a recurring problem, the attorney sat. Judge Marshall continued. The Army offered temporary in-home assistance, transportation support, infant care, and rehabilitation coordination. She looked directly at Daniel. You declined all 4. The courtroom seemed to contract around us. Daniel cleared his throat. I believed family matters should remain private. You told this court Mrs. Carter had no safe plan for caring for Noah. At the time, I did not believe strangers should be in our home. They were trained military family support personnel. I did not know that. The records indicate the services were explained to you. Daniel said nothing. I remembered those weeks. The unanswered calls. The temporary custody papers. The way he insisted I had no plan while refusing every resource that would have created one. For 9 years, I believed he had left because my injuries frightened him. Now, sitting in that courtroom, I understood something colder. He had not merely walked away from the support available to us, he had removed it. Judge Marshall looked toward Linda. Ms. Brooks, did your client know these services had been offered? Linda stood. No, Your Honor. Lieutenant Colonel Carter believed the Family Support Office had determined she was not eligible after medical retirement proceedings began. The judge looked at me. Is that correct? Yes. Did Mr. Carter tell you he declined the services? No. Daniel's attorney whispered something to him. Daniel shook his head. Too quickly. Judge Marshall closed the military file halfway. I am going to recess for 30 minutes. When we return, I want to hear from the child advocate. The bailiff called for everyone to rise. Judge Marshall left through the side door. The moment she disappeared, the courtroom filled with quiet movement. Chairs shifted. Attorneys gathered papers. People whispered. Daniel stood and walked directly toward me. Linda stepped between us. Any communication goes through counsel. Daniel ignored her. You knew that was in the file. No, I said. You set this up. I authorized the complete record. You wanted to embarrass me. I looked at him. For years, Daniel had described every fact that made him uncomfortable as something I had done to him. You declined support and told the court none existed. I made the best decision I could. For who? His jaw tightened. You were not capable of caring for an infant. The Army offered help. I did not want strangers raising my son. So you took him from his mother. I protected him. There was that word again. Protect. Daniel's favorite place to hide control. Claire approached from behind him. Daniel, your attorney needs you. He did not move. I noticed something in her face. Not anger, fear. She had not known about the support records either. Linda touched my arm. We should step outside. The courthouse hallway smelled like floor polish and old paper. Noah stood near a window with the child advocate, Marissa Cole. When he saw me, he gave a small smile. I smiled back. I wanted to walk over. Marissa raised one hand gently. Not yet. The court had instructed both parents not to discuss testimony with him during the hearing. So I sat on a wooden bench across the hallway and waited. Michael joined me. He handed me a paper cup of coffee. You okay? I do not know. That is honest. I took the cup. The coffee was too hot to drink. Michael looked toward the courtroom doors. He knew they offered help. Yes. He let you believe there was none. Yes. Michael's hands tightened. I knew that expression. He wanted to walk back into the courtroom and say everything I had spent years teaching him not to say. Do not, I told him. I did not say anything. You did not need to. He leaned back. I remember you apologizing because you thought the Army had forgotten you. I looked down at the coffee. After Daniel declined the services, I assumed someone had decided I was no longer part of the system. I had felt ashamed for needing help. That shame had belonged to the wrong person. The courtroom doors opened again 20 minutes later. Daniel's attorney stepped into the hallway and spoke quietly with Claire. She looked toward me. Then she walked away from him. Only a few feet. But it was enough. People reveal what they believe through distance long before they admit it with words. When court resumed, Marissa Cole took the stand. She had interviewed Noah 5 times over the previous 2 months. She had visited both homes, spoken with teachers, reviewed medical records, watched us interact separately. Daniel's attorney questioned her first. Did Noah express concern about his mother's health? Yes. Daniel looked toward me. His confidence returned. Did he say he worries she may fall? Yes. Did he say her pain sometimes prevents activities? Yes. Would a child benefit from living primarily in a home without those limitations? Marissa paused. Not necessarily. The attorney frowned. Can you explain? Children benefit from stability, honesty, and emotional safety. Physical ability is one part of caregiving. It is not the only part. End quote. The attorney changed direction. Did Noah say he loves his father? Very much. Did he say he enjoys time at his father's home? Yes. Then why have you not recommended primary custody to Mr. Carter? Marissa looked toward Noah. Then, back at the attorney. Because Noah's concerns about his mother did not begin with her behavior. The attorney became still. What do you mean? He repeatedly used phrases that were not developmentally natural for a 12-year-old, such as medically unpredictable, emotionally compromised, physically unreliable. I felt my stomach tighten. Those were phrases from Daniel's petition. Marissa continued. When I asked Noah what those words meant, he could not explain them. Daniel looked at his son. Noah stared at the floor. The attorney cleared his throat. Children repeat language they hear. That does not prove coercion. No, Marissa said. It does not. She opened a folder. But a recording does. The room went silent. Daniel's attorney turned toward him. What recording? Marissa looked toward Judge Marshall. During my 3rd home visit, Noah asked to speak with me alone. He provided an audio file from his tablet. Daniel's face lost color. I had no idea what she was talking about. Neither did Linda. Judge Marshall leaned forward. What is on the file? A conversation between Mr. Carter and Noah recorded 6 days before the custody petition was filed. Daniel stood. My son recorded me without permission? His attorney pulled him back down. Judge Marshall's expression hardened. Sit down, Mr. Carter. He sat. Marissa continued. In the recording, Mr. Carter tells Noah that his mother may not be able to care for him much longer. He instructs Noah to tell the evaluator that he is afraid when she walks, that she becomes confused after nightmares, and that he wants to live with his father during the academy year. My hands went cold. Daniel turned toward Noah again. This time Noah looked up. There were tears in his eyes. But he did not look away. Judge Marshall asked the bailiff to connect the courtroom audio system. Marissa handed the clerk a small drive. Daniel leaned toward his attorney, speaking rapidly now. His attorney did not answer. The clerk loaded the file. A few seconds of static filled the courtroom. Then Daniel's voice came through the speakers. Calm, patient, almost gentle. The same voice he had used 9 years earlier when he placed custody papers across my hospital bed. You do not have to lie, the recording said. You just have to help them understand how broken your mother really is. No one moved. The recording continued, and for the first time since the case began, Daniel was no longer describing me. He was proving exactly who he was. The recording lasted 4 minutes and 38 seconds. It felt longer. Daniel's voice remained calm throughout. That was the worst part. He never threatened Noah. He never shouted. He spoke the way he always did when he wanted control to sound reasonable. You know your mother loves you, he said through the courtroom speakers. But loving someone does not make them safe. Noah's voice came next. She takes care of me. For now. What does that mean? It means her condition can change. The doctors said she is okay. Doctors do not live with her. A pause followed. Then Daniel continued. When Miss Cole asks where you want to live, you need to think about your future. The academy is a serious opportunity. Your mother cannot travel the way we can. She cannot attend every event. She cannot give you the same stability. I do not want to leave her. You would not be leaving her. It feels like it. Another pause, longer this time. Then Daniel said the sentence Marissa had already described. You do not have to lie. You just have to help them understand how broken your mother really is. The file ended. No one moved. The clerk removed the drive from the computer. A faint buzzing sound came from one of the fluorescent lights above us. Daniel stared at the table. His attorney leaned toward him and whispered urgently. Daniel shook his head. Judge Marshall folded her hands. Mr. Carter, did you know this conversation was being recorded? No, Your Honor. That was not my question. Daniel looked up. I did not know. The judge's voice remained level. Did you have this conversation with your son? He hesitated. Yes. Did you instruct him to use language from your custody petition? I was helping him express concerns he already had. Marissa opened her folder. Your Honor, Noah told me he had never used the word broken to describe his mother before that conversation. Daniel turned toward her. He is a child. He does not always know how to explain what he feels. That is true, Marissa replied, which is why adults should not provide him with conclusions. Daniel's attorney stood. Your Honor, parents discuss difficult subjects with children every day. My client may have chosen imperfect words, but that does not prove manipulation. Judge Marshall looked toward Noah. No, it does not prove everything. Then she looked back at Daniel. But it proves enough to require serious concern. Linda rose for cross-examination. She did not approach Marissa aggressively. She asked simple questions. Did Noah ever say his mother failed to provide food? No. Medical care? No. School transportation? No. Emotional support? No. Did he describe any incident in which Lieutenant Colonel Carter's injuries placed him in danger? No. Did you observe Mrs. Carter's home? 3 times. Was it accessible? Yes. Was it safe? Yes. Was it stable? Yes. Linda paused. What did Noah say he feared most? Marissa looked toward him before answering. He feared that if he did not choose his father would stop loving him. I closed my eyes. The sentence hurt more than anything Daniel had said about me. Children should never have to earn a parent's love by choosing sides. When I opened my eyes, Noah was looking at me. I gave him the smallest nod I could, not reassurance that everything would be perfect, only a promise that none of this was his fault. Linda returned to the table. Judge Marshall asked Marissa to remain seated. Then she turned to Daniel. Why did you file for primary custody now? Daniel answered quickly. Because Noah's future is becoming more demanding. He has lived under the current arrangement for nearly 10 years. He is older now. He was accepted into a leadership academy, yes, and you believe that requires removing him from his mother's primary care. I believe he needs every opportunity available. Judge Marshall looked at the documents before her. Your petition was filed 11 days after the academy acceptance. Daniel said nothing. The judge continued. You also contacted the academy before filing. His attorney turned toward him. That appeared to be new information. Judge Marshall lifted an email. You introduced yourself as Noah's primary parent and requested information about donor events, family publicity, and scholarship sponsorship. My stomach tightened. I knew Daniel had contacted the academy. I did not know what he had asked. The judge read one line from the email. Noah's story could reflect well on families who overcome military-related hardship. Daniel's face changed. His attorney closed his eyes briefly. Judge Marshall lowered the page. What hardship were you referring to? Daniel looked toward me. My former wife's injuries. You intended to use her service and injuries as part of your son's public story? That is not what I meant. It is what you wrote. I was trying to secure support for Noah. By presenting yourself as the parent helping him overcome his mother, Daniel's voice sharpened. You are twisting my words. The courtroom went still. Judge Marshall did not react to his tone. She simply waited. Daniel seemed to hear himself too late. He lowered his eyes. I apologize, Your Honor. The judge placed the email beside the military file. Lieutenant Colonel Carter's injuries were useful to you when they supported a story about your sacrifice. Daniel said nothing. They became evidence of instability when you wanted custody. Still nothing. Judge Marshall looked toward Linda. Does your client wish to testify? Linda turned to me. We had discussed this. She had told me I did not need to prove my entire life from the witness stand. The records already did that. But there was one thing I needed the court to understand. I stood. Yes, Your Honor. I took the oath and sat in the witness chair. Linda began with ordinary questions. My current job, my medical care, my home, Noah's school, his medications, his academy schedule. Then she asked, do your injuries affect your daily life? Yes. How? I wake up in pain. I walk with a limp. Some days are harder than others. Do you hide that from Noah? No. Why not? Because pain is not shameful. Linda nodded. Have your injuries ever prevented you from caring for him? No. Have they changed the way you parent? Yes. Daniel's attorney looked up. Linda waited. How? I looked at Noah. They taught me to ask for help before pride becomes dangerous. They taught me that strength is not doing everything alone, and they taught me that people are not broken simply because something happened to them. Linda returned to her seat. Daniel's attorney stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Carter, you admit you still experience pain. Yes. You admit you have nightmares. Occasionally. You admit you cannot run. Yes. If Noah were injured several hundred yards away, could you reach him as quickly as an able-bodied parent? My body would hurt afterward. That was not my question. I would reach him. He frowned. You cannot guarantee that. No parent can. He changed direction. You resent Mr. Carter for leaving after your deployment. I resented him for a long time, and that resentment affects your judgment. No. You expect this court to believe you feel no anger. I did not say that. What did you say? I said anger does not make my decisions. He stared at me. Then he glanced toward the military file. No further questions. Judge Marshall recessed again. This time, she returned 20 minutes later carrying a written order. Everyone stood. She asked us to sit. Then she looked at Daniel first. This case is not about whether Lieutenant Colonel Carter has injuries. She does. Daniel remained still. It is not about whether she experiences pain. She does. The judge turned toward me. It is about whether those facts make her an unfit parent. She looked down at the order. They do not. My hands tightened beneath the table. Judge Marshall continued. The evidence shows that Mrs. Carter has provided Noah with a stable home, consistent medical care, academic support, and emotional security for nearly his entire life. The evidence also shows that Mr. Carter attempted to influence the child's statements, withheld material information regarding military family assistance, and used the child's academy acceptance to justify a custody change that was not supported by his needs. Daniel's shoulders lowered. The petition for primary custody is denied. I heard Michael release a breath behind me. The judge was not finished. Effective immediately, Lieutenant Colonel Carter will retain primary physical custody. Daniel looked up sharply. Our existing schedule will be modified. His attorney touched his arm. Judge Marshall continued. Mr. Carter will receive therapeutic visitation supervised by a family counselor for the next 90 days. Any expansion will depend on the counselor's findings and Noah's emotional well-being. Daniel's face went pale. You are taking my son from me. Judge Marshall's expression hardened. No, Mr. Carter. I am protecting your son from being asked to choose between his parents. He looked toward Noah. Noah did not look back. The judge added one final condition. Neither parent will discuss litigation, medical conclusions, or custody strategy with the child. Mr. Carter, any further attempt to coach or pressure Noah will be treated as a serious violation. Daniel lowered his head. The hearing ended. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun reflected off the windows of parked cars. There were no reporters, no cameras, no public celebration. Just ordinary people, leaving an ordinary building after decisions that would change the rest of their lives. Noah came through the doors with Marissa. For 1 second, he stood between us. Daniel waited near the courthouse steps. I remained beside Linda. Noah looked at his father first. "I am sorry," he said. Daniel's face tightened. "You have nothing to apologize for. I recorded you." Daniel looked toward me as if I had arranged it. I had not. Noah continued. "I did not know what else to do." For the first time that day, Daniel seemed to understand what the recording meant beyond the court order. His son had been afraid to tell him no. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. Noah walked toward me. He wrapped both arms around my waist carefully, the way he had learned to hug without pressing against the injuries in my ribs. "Are you okay?" he asked. I held him tighter. "I am now." The next 90 days were not easy. Therapy rarely is. Noah was angry with Daniel, then guilty for being angry. Daniel began each counseling session by explaining himself. The counselor kept asking him to stop explaining and start listening. For weeks, he could not. Claire moved out 2 months after the hearing. She sent me a short email before she left. She said she had believed Daniel's version of our history because it was the only one he had ever told her. I did not blame her. I also did not comfort her. Some lessons belong to the person learning them. Daniel eventually admitted he had wanted the academy to see him as the parent behind Noah's success. He had attended almost no parent conferences. He had not helped with the application. He did not know Noah's essay was about veterans building wheelchair ramps, but he wanted the photograph, the donor dinners, the public story. He wanted the reward without the years that created it. The counselor asked him whether he understood why Noah recorded him. Daniel cried. Not dramatically, not to persuade anyone. He lowered his face into his hands and said, "Because he did not trust me." It was the first honest thing I had heard him say in years. Trust did not return, because he finally understood. It returned slowly. One phone call at a time, one kept promise, one visit where he did not mention me, one apology that did not ask for immediate forgiveness. Daniel and I never became friends. We became something more useful. Two people who understood that Noah's peace mattered more than our pride. The Carolina Youth Leadership Academy did not ask Noah to use our family's history for publicity. He attended on his own merit. At the final ceremony that spring, students were asked to introduce the person who had taught them the most about leadership. Daniel sat 3 rows behind me. I did not know whom Noah would choose. When his name was called, he walked to the microphone holding a folded sheet of paper. He looked nervous. Then he looked at me. "My mother taught me that being strong does not mean nothing hurts," he said. "It means pain does not get to decide who you become." The room applauded. I did not. My hands were shaking too badly. After the ceremony, Noah handed me a copy of his speech. Inside, beneath his name, he had written one sentence. "You were never broken." I kept that page. Not because I needed my son to prove anything, because sometimes the people we love return our own lessons to us when we need them most. Daniel called me too broken to raise our son. He believed the scars on my body told the whole story. The judge opened my military record and found something else. Not perfection, not invincibility. A woman who had been injured, abandoned, underestimated, and still kept showing up. That was all Noah had ever needed. Not a mother who never fell, a mother who always got back up.